Daeho walked quickly through the empty streets. The cold winter air made his breath come out in small white clouds. He pulled his jacket tighter around his body as he hurried home from the university library. It was past midnight now, and the buses had stopped running hours ago. The young man was 20 years old and studied biology at Seoul National University. He had spent the whole evening reading about animal behavior for his upcoming exam. His backpack was heavy with thick textbooks, and his shoulders ached from carrying it for so long. Usually Daeho took the main road home to his small apartment. But tonight he decided to take a shortcut through the old industrial area. The factories there had been closed for years, and most of the buildings were falling apart. People said it was dangerous to walk there alone at night, but Daeho was tired and wanted to get home as fast as possible. The streetlights in this part of the city were old and broken. Many of them flickered on and off, making strange shadows dance on the cracked pavement. Some lights did not work at all, leaving dark spaces between the abandoned buildings. Daeho used his phone's flashlight to see where he was going. As he walked past a large warehouse with broken windows, he heard something unusual. It was not a sound he recognized. It was too soft to be a machine and too strange to be an animal. The noise seemed to come from inside the old building. Daeho stopped walking and listened carefully. The sound came again. It was like a sad whimper mixed with a musical hum. His curiosity got the better of him, even though he knew he should probably keep walking and go home. He found a gap in the metal wall of the warehouse where the sheets had rusted through. The opening was just big enough for a person to squeeze through. Daeho hesitated for a moment, then decided to look inside. The first thing he noticed was a strange blue light coming from the center of the empty building. It was not like any light he had ever seen before. It seemed to pulse gently like a heartbeat and cast soft shadows on the concrete floor. Daeho carefully climbed through the hole in the wall. His jacket caught on the sharp metal edges, but he managed to get inside without tearing it too badly. The floor was covered with broken glass pieces of old machinery and piles of garbage that had been thrown there over the years. As he got closer to the source of the blue light, his eyes grew wide with shock. In the middle of the warehouse floor lay a creature that looked like it came from a fairy tale. It was about the size of a house cat, but its body was covered in scales that shined with their own inner light. The creature had 4 legs and 2 wings that were folded against its sides. Its head was shaped like a dragon from the old stories, but its eyes were large and intelligent. The scales on its body changed color slowly from deep blue to bright silver as the creature breathed, but what made Daeho gasp with horror were the thick metal chains wrapped around the creature's body. The chains bound its wings tightly against its back and held its legs together so it could not move. Each link in the chains glowed with a red light that seemed to burn the creature's skin wherever it touched. The small dragon-like being looked up at Daeho with eyes full of pain and hope. It made the soft whimpering sound again and tried to move toward him, but the chains held it in place. Small burns covered its beautiful scales where the metal touched its skin. Daeho knelt down slowly next to the creature. He had never seen anything like it before. This was definitely not an animal from Earth. The young man's mind raced as he tried to understand what he was looking at. Was this really an alien creature? How had it gotten here? Who had chained it up like this? The creature watched him carefully but did not seem afraid. Instead, it seemed to be studying Daeho just as much as he was studying it. There was an intelligence in its eyes that reminded him more of a person than an animal. "Hey there, little one," Daeho said softly in Korean. "What happened to you?" The creature tilted its head at the sound of his voice. It made a series of gentle chirping sounds that almost sounded like it was trying to talk back to him. The blue light from its scales grew a little brighter. Daeho looked closely at the chains that bound the creature. They were not made of any metal he recognized. The surface was smooth and seemed to have patterns carved into each link. The red glow that came from inside the metal looked like some kind of energy, rather than heat from fire. As he examined the chains more carefully, he noticed that the glowing patterns were not random. They seemed to follow some kind of order, like a mathematical sequence or a code. His years of studying science had taught him to look for patterns in nature, and these definitely had a purpose. The creature made another sound that was clearly meant to get his attention. When Daeho looked at its face, he saw that it was watching his hands as he studied the chains. The alien being seemed to understand that he was trying to figure out how to help. Daeho reached out slowly toward one of the chains. The creature did not pull away even though the metal was clearly causing it pain. As his finger got close to the surface, he could feel heat radiating from the red glow. He pulled his hand back and thought carefully. These chains were obviously some kind of advanced technology. They were designed to hold this creature prisoner and cause it pain, but every lock had a key and every code could be broken if you understood how it worked. The young student looked at the patterns in the metal again. He had always been good with puzzles and mathematical problems. The glowing lines reminded him of circuit diagrams he had seen in his engineering classes. If he was right about what he was seeing, then these chains had some kind of electronic lock system. The creature watched, him with growing hope as Daeho traced the pattern. With his finger, without actually touching the hot metal, he followed the lines from one end of a chain link to the other, trying to understand how the system worked. After several minutes of careful study, he thought he had figured it out. There were specific points where the glowing lines came together. If he pressed these points in the right order, it might unlock the chains. It was just a guess, but it was the only idea he had. Daeho looked into the creature's eyes and made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. Daeho took a deep breath and moved his finger toward the first glowing point on the chain. The heat from the red energy made his skin feel warm even before he touched it. The alien creature watched him with complete trust in its large eyes. When his finger made contact with the metal, the sensation was strange. Instead of burning hot like he expected, it felt more like touching warm water that moved under his skin. The glowing pattern under his finger pulsed once and changed from red to yellow. The creature made a soft sound that seemed encouraging. Daeho gained confidence and pressed the second point in the sequence he had figured out. Again, the metal felt warm and alive under his touch. The yellow glow spread to connect the 2 points he had pressed. Following the pattern he had traced earlier, Daeho continued pressing points along the chain links. Each touch caused the glow to change color and spread further along the metal. Red became yellow, then yellow became green, then green became blue. The creature's breathing became easier as the energy changed. When Daeho pressed the 7th point in the sequence, something amazing happened. The entire chain began to vibrate and make a musical humming sound. The blue glow spread rapidly through every link, until the whole restraint was covered in gentle blue light that matched the creature's natural glow. With a soft chiming sound, like wind bells, the first chain simply fell apart. The metal links separated cleanly and dropped to the concrete floor with small ringing noises. The creature's left wing was suddenly free and it stretched the wing, carefully testing its movement. The alien being looked at Daeho with what could only be described as amazement. It chirped softly and nodded its head toward the remaining chains that still held its other wing and legs. Daeho smiled and moved to the next restraint. Now that he understood how the system worked, the second chain was easier to unlock. The pattern was slightly different, but followed the same basic rules. Press the right points in the right order and the energy would change from harmful red to harmless blue. As he worked on the third chain, Daeho began to wonder about the creature and where it had come from. The technology used to make these restraints was far beyond anything humans could build. The metal itself seemed to be alive in some way, responding to touch and changing its properties based on the sequence of contact points. The creature was clearly intelligent. It watched his every move and seemed to understand exactly what he was doing. When he hesitated over which point to press next, it would make small sounds and look toward the correct spot on the chain. "You are trying to help me figure this out, are you not?" Daeho said quietly as he worked on the 4th chain. The creature responded with a series of musical sounds that definitely seemed like an attempt at communication. The tones went up and down like speech, and some of the sounds were repeated as if they had specific meanings. When the last chain fell away, the creature was finally free. It stood up slowly and stretched each wing and leg carefully. Small wounds where the chains had burned its skin began to heal visibly. The damaged scales grew back and the burns faded until there was no sign they had ever existed. The alien being was beautiful now that Daeho could see it properly. Its scales shifted through different shades of blue and silver as it moved. The wings were delicate but looked strong enough for flight. Its claws were sharp, but it moved with careful grace that showed it had no intention of using them as weapons. The creature walked over to Daeho and sat down in front of him like a cat might do. It looked up at his face and made a long musical sound that conveyed gratitude better than any words could have. Then it did something that surprised the young man completely. The alien being reached out with one clawed hand and gently touched Daeho's finger, the same finger he had used to unlock the chains. The touch was warm and gentle, and somehow Daeho could feel emotions flowing between them. Gratitude, yes, but also relief and something that felt like friendship. For several minutes they sat together in the abandoned warehouse, neither human nor alien speaking. The blue glow from the creature's scales provided the only light in the dark building. Daeho felt a sense of connection with this being that was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Finally, the creature stood up and walked over to a clear area of the floor. Using one claw, it began to draw shapes in the dust and dirt. The drawings were precise and detailed, showing stars and planets and what looked like spacecraft moving between them. Daeho watched, fascinated, as the alien drew what was clearly a map of space. It showed solar systems connected by lines that might represent travel routes. Some of the planets were marked with symbols while others were left blank. The creature pointed to one small planet in the drawing, then pointed upward toward the ceiling. It was showing him Earth and indicating that it came from somewhere else among the stars. This confirmed what Daeho had already suspected. This was definitely not an animal from his world. Next, the creature drew pictures of other beings that looked similar to itself but larger. It showed them flying through space and visiting different worlds. But then it drew different shapes that looked angry and threatening. These new shapes seemed to be chasing and capturing the dragon-like beings. The alien pointed to the chains that now lay broken on the floor, then to the threatening shapes in its drawing. It was telling him a story about being captured by enemies and brought to Earth as a prisoner. Daeho began to understand that he had stumbled into something much bigger than just helping one hurt animal. This creature was a refugee from some kind of war happening in space. The chains had been torture devices used by its captors. The young man looked at the broken restraints scattered around them and realized that whoever had built those chains might come looking for their prisoner. The technology was so advanced that the aliens who made it could probably track Earth down if they wanted to. He had freed this creature from torture, but in doing so, he might have put his entire planet in danger. The thought scared him, but when he looked at the grateful alien being, he knew he had made the right choice. Sometimes doing what was right was more important than being safe. The creature seemed to sense his concern. It walked back over to him and made reassuring sounds while gently touching his hand again. Through that strange connection they shared, Daeho felt that the alien was trying to tell him everything would be okay. But both of them knew their adventure was just beginning. Daeho knew he could not leave the creature alone in the abandoned warehouse. The alien being was free now, but it was still lost and far from home. He also worried that whoever had chained it up might come back looking for it. "You should come with me," he said to the creature. "My apartment is small, but it is safe and warm." The alien tilted its head and made questioning sounds. It seemed to understand that Daeho was offering help, but was not sure what he meant. Daeho pointed to himself, then to the creature, then toward the hole in the wall they had used to enter the building. Understanding crossed the creature's intelligent eyes. It nodded and gathered itself to follow him. But when they reached the opening in the wall, there was a problem. The hole was just big enough for a human to squeeze through, but the creature's wings made it too wide to fit. The alien being studied the opening for a moment, then did something remarkable. It folded its wings so tightly against its body that they almost disappeared. Its scales shifted color from blue to dark gray, making it much harder to see in the shadows. The creature had made itself smaller and nearly invisible. They made their way carefully through the dark streets toward Daeho's apartment building. The young man kept looking around to make sure no one saw them, but the creature's natural camouflage made it almost impossible to spot even when he knew exactly where it was. His apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old building near the university. It was just one small room with a tiny kitchen and bathroom, but it was clean and private. Daeho had lived there for 2 years while studying, and it felt like home to him. The creature explored the apartment with great curiosity. It examined everything carefully, using its claws to touch different objects and materials. The alien seemed particularly interested in Daeho's computer and the books on his shelves. "Are you hungry?" Daeho asked as he opened his refrigerator. He had no idea what the creature might eat, but he had some fruits and vegetables that seemed safe to offer. The alien made interested sounds when it saw the apple Daeho held out. It took the fruit carefully in its claws and sniffed it thoroughly before taking a small bite. Its eyes widened with pleasure, and it ate the rest of the apple quickly but neatly. Over the next few hours, Daeho learned many things about his new companion. The creature was very clean and careful not to damage anything in the apartment. It was also incredibly intelligent and seemed to learn new things almost instantly. When Daeho showed it how the light switch worked, the alien immediately understood the concept and began turning lights on and off to test the system. When he demonstrated how to turn on the faucet in the sink, the creature spent 20 minutes experimenting with different water temperatures and pressures. Most amazing of all was how quickly it began to understand human language. Daeho started by pointing to objects and saying their names in Korean. The alien would repeat the sounds with its musical voice and remember them perfectly. Within just a few hours, it had learned the words for dozens of common items. "You are very smart," Daeho said as he watched the creature arrange his books in what seemed to be a more logical order than he had ever managed. "Smart," the alien repeated in its musical voice. It pointed to itself, then to Daeho. "Smart, Daeho, smart." Hearing his name spoken by an alien being gave Daeho chills. This was really happening.
He had made contact with an intelligent creature from
another world, and they were actually communicating. As the night wore on, the creature began to share more of its story through a combination of simple words and drawings. It drew pictures showing its home world, which seemed to be covered in crystal cities that grew like plants toward the sky. The buildings were organic and beautiful and filled with creatures like itself. But then the alien drew darker pictures. Ships that looked like metal insects came to its world carrying creatures that were clearly evil. These invaders captured many of the dragon-like beings and destroyed the crystal cities. The alien showed itself being taken away in one of the dark ships. "Bad ones," the creature said, pointing to the drawings of the invaders. It struggled to find the right words to explain. "Take, hurt, play with pain." Daeho felt sick as he began to understand what the alien was telling him. The beautiful creature had been captured by some kind of slave traders who used their prisoners for entertainment. The chains had not just been restraints, but torture devices designed to cause maximum suffering. "They brought you to Earth," Daeho said. It was not a question. The evidence was clear from the alien's drawings and gestures. "Earth," the creature repeated, learning another new word. It pointed down at the floor, then made a sweeping gesture that seemed to indicate the whole planet. "Earth next." Those two words hit Daeho like a physical blow. The creature was trying to tell him that Earth was the next target for the alien invaders. Humanity was about to face the same fate as this creature's people. "How long do we have?" he asked, though he was not sure the alien understood enough language yet to answer such a complex question. The creature held up its claws and began counting in a way that suggested large numbers. It drew pictures of the sun rising and setting many times. From what Daeho could understand, they had maybe a few years before the invasion arrived. The young man sat down heavily in his chair as the full weight of the situation hit him. He had rescued an alien refugee and in doing so had learned that his entire species was in terrible danger. The people who had tortured this gentle creature were coming to Earth to do the same thing to humanity. But he had also gained something incredibly valuable. This alien being had knowledge and technology that could help humanity prepare for what was coming. The creature's intelligence and willingness to share information might be the key to Earth's survival. "We need help," Daeho said, looking at his new friend. "My people need to know about this. We have to warn them and get ready to fight." The alien nodded seriously. It seemed to understand that Daeho was talking about something important. "Help," it repeated. "Fight bad ones." Over the next several hours, they worked together to create a plan. Daeho would take the creature to his university, where the smartest scientists could study its technology and learn about the coming threat. It would be dangerous to reveal the alien's existence, but they had no choice. As dawn light began to filter through the apartment windows, Daeho realized his life had changed completely in just one night. He was no longer just a biology student worried about passing his exams. He had become humanity's first contact with alien intelligence and possibly their only hope for survival. The creature curled up in a corner of the room and began to glow softly as it fell asleep. Even in rest, it remained beautiful and peaceful despite everything it had suffered. Daeho watched over his new friend and made a silent promise that he would do everything in his power to help both their species survive what was coming. The next morning, Daeho called his biology professor, Dr. Hana Kim. She was one of the smartest people he knew and had always been kind to her students. If anyone could help him figure out what to do next, it would be her. "Professor Kim," he said when she answered the phone, "I need to show you something very important. Can you meet me at the university lab this morning?" "Of course, Daeho," she replied. "You sound worried. Is everything okay?" "I cannot explain over the phone," he said. But this could change everything we know about science. Please trust me and come alone. Dr. Kim agreed to meet him at 9 in the morning. Daeho spent the next hour figuring out how to transport the alien creature safely. He found a large backpack and lined it with soft towels. The creature understood what he was trying to do and curled up inside the bag with just its head sticking out. Getting to the university without being seen was tricky. The creature could change colors to blend in, but it was still clearly not a normal animal. Daeho kept the backpack partially closed and walked quickly through the back streets to avoid crowds. Dr. Kim was waiting in her private laboratory when they arrived. She was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and graying hair tied back in a neat bun. She had dedicated her life to studying animal behavior and biology. "What is this about, Daeho?" she asked as he closed and locked the lab door behind him. Instead of answering, Daeho carefully opened his backpack. The alien creature poked its head out and looked around the laboratory with great interest. When it saw Dr. Kim, it made a soft musical greeting sound. The professor's mouth fell open and she took a step backward. For a full minute, she just stared at the creature, unable to speak. Finally, she found her voice. "What in the world is that?" she whispered. "This is my friend," Daeho said as the creature climbed out of the backpack. "I found it last night chained up in an old warehouse. It is from another planet." Dr. Kim watched in amazement as the alien being explored the laboratory. It examined the microscopes and computers with obvious intelligence. When it found a chart showing the structure of DNA, it studied the diagram carefully and made excited chirping sounds. "It understands what it is looking at," the professor said in wonder. "This creature knows about advanced science." The alien had been learning more Korean words during the night at Daeho's apartment. It pointed to the DNA chart and said life code in its musical voice. Then it picked up a pencil and began drawing its own version of the diagram on a piece of paper. What it drew was far more complex than human DNA. The structure had extra parts that Dr. Kim had never seen before. The creature was showing them how genetic material worked on its homeworld. "Professor," Daeho said quietly, "there is something else you need to know. This creature's people were attacked by alien invaders. The same invaders are coming to Earth." He explained everything he had learned the night before. The creature helped by drawing pictures and using the few words it knew to fill in details. Dr. Kim listened with growing horror as the story unfolded. "How long do we have?" she asked when Daeho finished. Explaining, the alien held up its claws and counted again like it had done before. From its gestures and drawings, they estimated maybe 3 to 5 years before the invasion fleet arrived at Earth. Dr. Kim sat down heavily in her chair. As a scientist, she had always wondered if life existed on other planets. She had never imagined that the first contact would be a refugee warning them about an invasion. "We have to tell the government," she said. "The military needs to know about this threat." Daeho nodded, but he was worried about what would happen to his alien friend. "Will they hurt it?" he asked. "Will they lock it up and do experiments?" "I do not know," Dr. Kim admitted. "But we cannot handle this alone. This creature has knowledge that could save our entire planet. We have no choice but to involve others." The alien seemed to understand what they were discussing. It walked over to Daeho and gently touched his hand. Through their strange connection, the creature communicated feelings of trust and determination. It was willing to take risks if it meant protecting both their species from the coming invasion. Dr. Kim made several phone calls to colleagues and government contacts. Within 2 hours, the laboratory was filled with scientists, military officers, and officials from various agencies. Everyone stared in shock at the alien creature that sat calmly next to Daeho. General Nam Woo-jin was the highest-ranking military officer present. He was a stern man with gray hair and hard eyes who had spent his career preparing for threats to national security. But nothing had prepared him for this. "You are telling me this creature is from another planet," he said, looking skeptical. The alien answered him directly. In its musical voice it said, "Other world. Bad one's coming. Help fight." The room fell silent. Hearing an obvious non-human creature speak Korean was proof that could not be denied. This was really happening. "What can it tell us about the enemy?" the general asked. The creature spent the next several hours sharing everything it knew. It drew detailed pictures of the invader ships and weapons. It showed them maps of space with attack routes and timing. Most importantly, it began teaching them about advanced technology that Earth would need to defend itself. Dr. Kim worked with the creature to understand its drawings and translate its explanations. The alien was incredibly patient and would repeat information until the humans understood. It seemed to genuinely want to help them prepare for war. As the day went on, more people arrived at the laboratory. Scientists from other universities, military experts, and government officials all came to see the proof that humanity was not alone in the universe. But Dae-ho noticed that some of the newcomers looked at his alien friend differently than the others. Instead of wonder and curiosity, they showed calculation and greed. They were already thinking about how to use the creature rather than how to help it. The young man stayed close to his alien companion throughout the long day. The creature had trusted him with its life, and he was determined to protect it from those who might want to exploit it. By evening, it was clear that everything had changed. The secret was out, and there was no going back. Earth was about to enter a new age where they knew they were not alone, and that enemies were coming from the stars. The creature looked tired from the long day of explaining and teaching. But when it looked at Dae-ho, its eyes still held the same trust and friendship they had shared since their first meeting in the warehouse. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and difficult decisions. But tonight they had taken the first step toward preparing humanity for the greatest threat it had ever faced. 3 days later, Dae-ho found himself in a government building he had never seen before. The facility was underground with long white hallways and rooms full of computers and monitoring equipment. Armed guards stood at every door and checkpoint. The alien creature now had a name. Dr. Kim had started calling it Spark because of the way its scales glowed with inner light. The name seemed to please the creature, and it responded when anyone used it. Spark had been moved to a special laboratory designed for studying dangerous materials. The room had thick glass walls and air filters and monitoring systems that watched everything. Dae-ho hated seeing his friend trapped behind barriers, but he understood the precautions were necessary. General Nam had taken control of the situation. He treated Spark more like a valuable weapon than a living being with feelings. The general asked endless questions about enemy tactics and technology, but showed little interest in the creature's well-being. This alien represents our only advantage against the invasion, the general explained to a room full of officials. We must extract every piece of useful information as quickly as possible. Dr. Kim argued for a more careful approach. Spark is intelligent and cooperative, she said. We will learn more by treating it as a partner rather than a prisoner. But the government officials were more interested in quick results than long-term relationships. They approved the general's plan to move Spark to a secure military research facility where teams of specialists could study it around the clock. Dae-ho was allowed to visit the creature, but only for short periods and always under close supervision. He could see that Spark was becoming sad and stressed from all the testing and questioning. The alien's natural glow had dimmed, and it moved more slowly than before. I am sorry, my friend, Dae-ho whispered during one of his visits. I never meant for this to happen to you. Spark pressed its claws against the glass wall that separated them. Through their strange connection, the creature shared feelings of understanding and forgiveness. It knew that Dae-ho was not responsible for how others treated it. Meanwhile, teams of scientists worked day and night to understand the technology Spark had described. The alien's knowledge of physics and engineering was centuries ahead of human science. Even the simplest concepts it tried to explain were almost impossible for Earth's best minds to grasp. Dr. Kim spent most of her time acting as a translator between Spark and the research teams. The creature had learned enough Korean to communicate. Basic ideas but complex scientific concepts required careful explanation through drawings and demonstrations. Slowly, the scientists began to make progress. Spark taught them about new forms of energy that could power advanced weapons and shields. It showed them designs for materials that were stronger than anything humans had ever created. Most importantly, it explained how the enemy ships traveled faster than light between star systems. But every breakthrough came at a cost. The constant questioning and testing was wearing Spark down. The creature that had once been curious and eager to explore was becoming withdrawn and listless. Dae-ho could see his friend was suffering even though the researchers claimed they were not hurting it. We need to change how we are doing this, he told Dr. Kim after a particularly difficult day. Spark is getting sick from stress. If we lose it, we lose our only source of information about the invasion. Dr. Kim agreed, but she had little influence over the military officials running the program. General Nam cared only about results and saw Spark's emotional state as irrelevant to their mission. The breakthrough came when Spark suddenly stopped cooperating. The creature refused to answer questions or provide new information. It just sat in its containment room, staring at the walls and ignoring everyone who tried to communicate with it. "What is wrong with the alien?" General Nam demanded. "Why has it stopped helping us?" Dr. Kim had been expecting this. "Spark is not a machine," she explained. "It has feelings and needs just like any intelligent being. The constant pressure and isolation are making it depressed." "Then fix it," the general ordered. "Give it whatever it needs to start working again." "What it needs is freedom and respect," Dr. Kim replied. "It needs to be treated as a partner, not a prisoner." The argument that followed was heated and went on for hours. Military officials wanted to use stronger methods to force Spark to cooperate. Scientists argued that pushing too hard would only make the situation worse. Finally, Daeho was allowed to speak with Spark alone. He sat outside the containment room and talked to his friend through the intercom system. "I know this is hard," he said, "but your people and mine both need your help. The bad ones are still coming and we have to be ready for them." Spark looked at him with tired eyes. In its musical voice it said, "Want to help, but hurt inside. Need trust, not fear." That simple statement changed everything. Even General Nam could understand that they had been approaching the situation wrong. Fear and force would never build the kind of cooperation they needed to prepare for an interstellar war. Dr. Kim proposed a new arrangement. Spark would be moved to better facilities with more freedom to move around. Daeho would be assigned as the creature's permanent companion and advocate. The research would continue, but at a pace that respected Spark's emotional needs. The general reluctantly agreed to try the new approach. Within a week, Spark had been moved to a much better laboratory that felt more like a comfortable apartment than a prison cell. The space had windows and plants and areas where the creature could fly short distances to exercise its wings. Most importantly, Daeho was allowed to stay with Spark as much as he wanted. The young man moved into a small room next to the laboratory so he could be close to his friend at all times. The change in Spark was immediate and dramatic. The creature's natural glow returned, and it became eager to help with the research again. But now the work felt like collaboration between allies rather than interrogation of a prisoner. "You did the right thing," Dr. Kim told Daeho as they watched Spark enthusiastically explaining spaceship design to a group of engineers. "Your friendship with this creature may be the key to saving both species." Daeho nodded, but he was already thinking about the challenges ahead. They had made progress in understanding alien technology, but building actual weapons and defenses would take years. Time was running out, and the invasion fleet was getting closer every day. He looked at Spark, who was patiently drawing diagrams for human scientists who could barely understand the concepts being explained. The small alien creature was working harder than anyone to protect a world that was not even its home. "We will find a way to win," Daeho promised quietly. "We have to." Spark heard him and made a sound of agreement. Together, human and alien continued their desperate race against time to prepare Earth for a war that would determine the fate of two civilizations. 6 months had passed since Daeho first found Spark in the abandoned warehouse. The world had changed in ways that most people could never have imagined. Hidden deep in government facilities, teams of scientists and engineers worked around the clock to build weapons and defenses based on alien technology. Spark had grown stronger and more confident during its time working with the human researchers. The creature's scales now glowed brighter than ever, and it had learned to speak Korean fluently. Its friendship with Daeho had deepened into something that felt like family. But despite all their progress, the humans were still far behind the technology they would need to fight the invasion. The enemy ships that Spark described were powered by energy sources that Earth scientists barely understood. Their weapons could destroy entire cities, and their shields could stop any attack humans could mount. "We need help," Dr. Kim said during one of their weekly progress meetings. "Even with everything Spark has taught us, we cannot build a defense strong enough to stop the invasion." General Nam had reached the same conclusion. "What kind of help?" he asked. "There is no one else on Earth who knows about this threat." Spark had been listening to the conversation from its place next to Daeho. Suddenly, the creature stood up and made excited chirping sounds. It rushed to the whiteboard and began drawing rapidly. The alien drew a map of local space showing several star systems connected by travel routes. Some of the planets were marked with symbols that Spark had used before to represent its own people. The creature pointed to these worlds and said, "Family still fighting. Can help." Dr. Kim studied the drawings carefully. "You are saying there are other survivors from your species?" she asked. "They are still fighting the invaders." "Yes," Spark replied. "Hidden places. Secret bases. Still have ships and weapons. Need to find them." The idea was both exciting and terrifying. If Spark's people were still alive and fighting, then Earth might have allies in the coming war. But reaching them would require space travel technology that humans did not possess. "How far away are these bases?" General Nam asked. Spark drew more diagrams showing the distances involved. Even traveling at the speed of light, it would take years to reach the nearest refuge. But the creature had another idea. "Fast travel," Spark said using words it had learned from human science fiction movies. "Fold space. Make distance shorter." The alien began explaining concepts that hurt Daeho's brain just thinking about them. Folding space meant bending the fabric of reality itself to create shortcuts between distant points. It was technology that seemed like magic to human understanding, but Spark insisted it was possible. The creature had memories passed down from its parents that included knowledge of how the space folding systems worked. With human engineering skills and alien knowledge, they might be able to build a ship capable of faster-than-light travel. "Even if we could build such a ship," Dr. Kim said, "it would be incredibly dangerous. We would be sending people into unknown space with experimental technology." "Someone has to go," Daeho said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. "If Spark's people can help us fight the invasion, then we have to try to reach them. The risk is worth it." General Nam nodded slowly. "Who would go on such a mission?" "I will," Daeho replied immediately. "Spark trusts me and I understand how to communicate with it. We work well together." "Absolutely not," Dr. Kim protested. "You are not a trained astronaut or soldier. This mission would require experienced professionals." But Spark had other ideas. The creature walked over to Daeho and gently touched his hand. "Need friend," it said simply. "Others not understand." Daeho helped talk to family. The debate continued for weeks. Building a faster-than-light spacecraft would require resources and expertise from across the globe. It would also mean revealing the alien threat to more people, which increased the risk of panic or interference. Finally, the decision was made to proceed with the mission. Construction began on a small ship designed using a combination of human engineering and alien science. The vessel would carry a crew of 6 people, including Daeho and Spark. The ship took 8 months to build. Every component had to be manufactured from scratch using new materials and techniques that Spark helped design. The power source alone required breakthroughs in physics that won 3 Nobel Prizes for the scientists involved. Daeho spent the construction period training for space travel. He learned how to operate alien technology and survive in zero gravity. He studied star navigation and basic engineering so he could help maintain the ship during the journey. Most importantly, he continued working with Spark to prepare for contact with the aliens' people. The creature taught him the musical language of its species and explained cultural customs that would be important during negotiations. "Your people might not trust humans at first," Daeho said during one of their practice sessions. "We are so different from you." "Different, yes," Spark agreed. "But friend showed kindness to stranger. Family will understand. We'll see good in humans like Spark sees." The launch day arrived with little ceremony. The mission was still classified and only a few dozen people knew it was happening. The ship lifted off from a secret facility in the desert and disappeared into space using technology that officially did not exist. Daeho felt a mixture of fear and excitement as Earth grew smaller behind them. He was the first human to leave the solar system, and he was traveling with his best friend to meet an alien civilization. It was the adventure of a lifetime, but also a desperate mission to save 2 worlds. The faster-than-light travel was unlike anything he could have imagined. Space seemed to fold around their ship as reality bent and twisted in impossible ways. Colors that had no names flashed past the windows, and time moved strangely until Daeho could not tell if seconds or hours were passing. When normal space returned, they found themselves in orbit around a planet that looked nothing like Earth. The world was covered in crystal, formations that reached up from the surface like frozen lightning. Beautiful cities grew from the crystals themselves, creating a landscape that seemed like art more than architecture. Home, Spark whispered as tears ran down its scaled cheeks. The creature had not seen its homeworld for almost 2 years, but as their ship moved closer, they could see the damage from the war. Many of the crystal cities were broken and dark. Massive craters scarred the planet's surface where enemy weapons had struck. This beautiful world had been turned into a battlefield. Their radio crackled with incoming messages in the musical language of Spark's people. The alien quickly responded, explaining who they were and why they had come. The conversation that followed was rapid and emotional as Spark shared its story with its own kind. Finally, Spark turned to Daeho with excitement shining in its eyes. "Family wants to meet humans," it said. "Want to hear about friendship and alliance? There is hope." As their ship was guided toward a landing pad on the damaged world, Daeho realized they had accomplished something that many people thought was impossible. They had crossed the void between stars and made contact with an alien civilization. Now came the hard part. They had to convince two very different species to work together to fight an enemy that threatened them both. The fate of Earth and Spark's homeworld depended on what happened in the next few hours. But looking at his alien friend who glowed with happiness at being home again, Daeho felt confident they could succeed. After all, their friendship had already survived impossible odds. Perhaps it was strong enough to unite two worlds. The crystal city where they landed was unlike anything Daeho had ever seen. The buildings grew from the ground like living things, reaching toward the sky in spirals and curves that seemed to defy gravity. Light flowed through the crystal walls, creating patterns that changed as the alien inhabitants moved through their homes. Spark's people were waiting for them at the landing platform. Dozens of creatures similar to Spark, but larger and older, gathered around their ship as it touched down. Their scales showed colors that Daeho had never seen before, and their wings were magnificent when spread in greeting displays. The reunion between Spark and its family was beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. The young alien rushed to embrace beings who had thought it was dead. The musical sounds they made together created harmonies that brought tears to Daeho's eyes, even though he could not understand all the words. But the most important moment came when Spark introduced Daeho to its parent. Commander Veltar was an ancient being whose scales had turned silver with age, and whose eyes held the wisdom of centuries. This creature had led the resistance against the invaders for longer than Daeho had been alive. "You are the human who freed my child," Commander Veltar said in careful Korean that Spark had taught it through their mental connection. "My family owes you a debt that can never be repaid." "No debt," Daeho replied using the few words of alien language he had learned. "Spark is my friend. Friends help each other." The concept of friendship across species barriers seemed to fascinate the alien commander. It spent several minutes asking questions about human relationships and social bonds. Through Spark's translation, Daeho explained how humans formed connections based on shared experiences and mutual respect, rather than just biological similarity. "Your species shows great wisdom," Commander Veltar finally said. "We had begun to believe that only our people were capable of such bonds. You have given us hope that other civilizations can be trusted." The formal negotiations took place in a great hall made entirely of crystal that amplified sound and light. Representatives from the human expedition sat across from the alien council in what was essentially the first interstellar diplomatic meeting in history. Commander Veltar explained the situation facing both their worlds. The enemy, known as the Dominion, had been expanding across the galaxy for thousands of years. They conquered civilizations not just for resources but for entertainment. Captured beings were forced to fight in arenas for the amusement of their captors. Spark's people had been fighting a losing war for generations. Their beautiful crystal cities had been turned into fortresses, and their peaceful culture had been forced to adapt to constant warfare. Entire worlds had fallen, and millions of their people had been taken as slaves. "Earth represents something we have not seen in centuries," the commander continued. "A world that still has hope. A species that has not yet been broken by endless war. Your people's rapid adaptation to our technology shows potential that could change the balance of power." Daeho listened as the aliens explained their strategy for fighting the Dominion. For too long they had focused on defense and survival, but with human creativity and determination, they might be able to go on the offensive for the first time in generations. The alliance that emerged from these discussions was more comprehensive than anyone had imagined. Alien technology would be shared freely with human engineers. Joint training programs would teach both species new ways of fighting. Most importantly, cultural exchange would help each civilization understand the strengths of the other. Humans have something we lost long ago, Commander Veltar explained to Deho during a private conversation. You still believe that impossible things can be accomplished through determination and teamwork. That belief makes you dangerous to the Dominion in ways they do not expect. Over the following weeks, detailed plans were made for Earth's defense. Alien engineers would travel to the human homeworld to help build better weapons and shields. Human strategists would work with alien military leaders to develop new tactics for fighting the Dominion fleet. But the most important part of the alliance was symbolic. Spark chose to return to Earth with the human expedition becoming the first permanent alien ambassador to humanity. The young creature that had been tortured as entertainment would now represent hope for cooperation between species. Are you sure you want to come back with us? Deho asked his friend as they prepared for the return journey. You are finally home with your family. Home is where friends are, Spark replied. Earth needs someone who understands both worlds, and humans need someone who remembers that kindness is stronger than fear. The return trip to Earth carried more than just the original crew. 3 alien engineers and 2 cultural specialists joined the mission along with technology and knowledge that would transform human civilization. But more importantly, they carried proof that cooperation between different species was possible. When they arrived back in Earth's solar system, they found a world that had been preparing for war. New weapons platforms orbited the planet and the moon had been turned into a fortress. Humanity had not been idle during their absence. General Nam met them at the landing site with news both good and troubling. The preparations for Earth's defense were ahead of schedule, thanks to the technology Spark had provided. But intelligence reports suggested the Dominion invasion fleet was also closer than expected. How long do we have? Deho asked. 2 years at most, the general replied. Maybe less if they decide to accelerate their attack. It was not much time, but it was enough. With alien allies working alongside human engineers, the impossible began to seem achievable. Earth's defense grid grew stronger every day, and new weapons were tested that could actually damage Dominion ships more. Importantly, the alliance between humans and Spark's people gave both species something they had been missing. Humans gained hope that they could survive the invasion. The aliens regained belief that peaceful civilizations could fight back and win. Deho often thought about that night in the abandoned warehouse when he had first found Spark chained and suffering. His decision to help a stranger had seemed simple at the time, but that single act of kindness had grown into something that would reshape the galaxy as he watched human and alien engineers working together to build weapons that would defend both their worlds. He realized something important. The real power was not in advanced technology or superior weapons. It was in the willingness of different beings to trust each other and work toward a common goal. Spark had taught him that friendship could cross any barrier, including the vast emptiness between stars. Now that friendship had become the foundation for an alliance that would determine whether 2 civilizations survived or fell to the darkness that threatened to consume everything. The invasion was coming, and the final battle would be fought in Earth's skies. But humanity would not face it alone. They had allies who understood that some things were worth fighting for, and friends who would never abandon each other no matter how desperate the situation became. Standing together, humans and aliens prepared to show the Dominion that their reign of terror had finally met its match. The galaxy was about to learn that kindness backed by determination was the most powerful force in the universe, and it had all started with a young student who chose to help a suffering creature rather than walk away. Sometimes the smallest acts of compassion can change the fate of entire worlds.